The New York Jets plan on moving forward with Zach Wilson as part of the big picture and plan on working with him and to get him to be at his full potential come hell or high water. Those the words of head coach Robert Saleh. I'm Glenn Naughton with JetNation Radio and JetNation.com. Be sure to log into JetNation.com where you can register and become a part of what is the most active Jets message board on the web. And I'll tell you what, right now, those forums on JetNation.com, just like Jets Twitter and Jets everything, people are fired up. They want heads to roll. They want coaches fired. They want players cut. They want big changes. I don't see it happening. Might see a couple small moves here and there, but these big grand changes and sweeping, it's not going to happen. Not going to happen. Don't get your hopes up. What is happening is that Robert Saleh has said the New York Jets will be sticking with Zach Wilson as part of their plans for the future. He also said Zach needs to step away from football for a little bit, go to the beach, read a book, decompress, make sense, before he gets back in the gym, on the field, to start working toward getting where he needs to be next year. Now, why is this a great idea? Because, as you know as a football fan, and fans come down on different sides of this, two ways to move forward with a quarterback when you draft one: play him right away, see what he's got, sink or swim. Let him sit and learn and develop and see what he's got when you feel he's ready. We have seen the first method work. We have seen the first method fail. We have seen the second method work. We have seen the second method fail. There is no surefire, absolute way of developing a quarterback. Every single quarterback is different, and I've often wondered in the past why teams, when they get it wrong with the first method, they don't then take a step back and say, look, let's try the second method. We've done some damage to this kid. It may not be irreparable. Let's take a step back and let's try the method that maybe would have worked better for him. And then you try, and then if that doesn't work, you say, look, we did what we could. We tried one method, we tried another. I don't believe that a bad year or so, because remember, Zach Wilson finished up strong last year. There were some very encouraging signs. I don't believe that a year of bad football is enough to destroy a kid for the rest of his life and he'll never be a good quarterback. I think that's sort of a hyperbolic thing that we hear from fans. We've ruined him, we've broken him, we've destroyed him. Let's try to rebuild the kid a little bit, okay? So this is what the Jets are doing. And I love this for a couple of reasons. One, you're not throwing away a huge investment. You're acknowledging the fact that the kid, whether you like Zach Wilson or not, if you can't see that there's insane talent there, I'll only say I disagree strongly. Like, as someone who's been calling for weeks for him to be benched and saying for weeks that right now, not forever, right now, Mike White is a better quarterback than Zach Wilson. I've been saying all these things. So I'm not a guy who's been on the Zach bandwagon. I was come at draft time. He was the guy I wanted. When it became apparent he was holding the team back, I just called it like I saw it, said he's not getting it done right now. And you could talk to me about, but Glenn, he had a winning record. Listen, I say it all the time. Tim Tebow had a winning record that year with the Broncos. Trent Dilfer won a Super Bowl and Dan Marino didn't. I get it. When a quarterback is carrying a team to wins and throwing 3, 4, 5 touchdowns a week, I don't have as much of a problem when you say the quarterback is winning games. But when the quarterback is being dragged to wins, when he's having to rely on everyone around him to make monster plays to compensate for the fact he's throwing for 140 yards and no touchdowns, I'm not going to sit there and say, you got to keep rolling with this guy, you're winning. No, you acknowledge at some point you're winning despite the kid, and the Jets were. And that doesn't mean that will always be that way. He might turn things around. So the New York Jets have said, there are two ways to develop a quarterback. We tried one way and it didn't work. Now we're going to try the other way. We're going to sit him down for a while, let him watch, let him learn from a veteran, because they will be bringing a veteran in here. I fear it will be Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't hate Jimmy Garoppolo. I hate Jimmy Garoppolo's injury history. I think Carr is the way to go, Derek Carr. But I think Derek Carr is going to have too many suitors. I think he's going to get big offers from more teams than Jimmy G will, and I think Carr will go elsewhere, maybe somewhere like Miami. If the Dolphins stick with Tua, that's fine, more power to them. I just think that's too big of a risk. So the Jets, I applaud the Jets for basically sitting down and saying, we got it wrong the first time, and Mike LaFleur said it yesterday. Mike LaFleur said maybe he had to sit for a little bit. And I don't disagree. We've seen it now, and I know Robert Saleh referenced, look at how Geno Smith's playing, look at how Sam Darnold's playing. Okay, a couple things there. Geno's been very good, but that took 7, 8, 9 years. They're not taking that long. Darnold has been okay. He's been carried a little bit. Panthers ran for like 400 yards a couple weeks ago. But in fairness to Darnold, Jets were blacked out the other day. I could only get it on Red Zone. I've since watched the full game, unfortunately. But I saw some of Darnold live, and he was throwing some dimes. Some of those TD passes were fantastic. Darnold looked great. But his Darnold's body of work this year has been much smaller than Geno. But the bottom line is that you do have a team that has given up on quarterbacks, and perhaps too early. Now, listen, as I said, Zach Wilson isn't going to get 7 years to get it. But maybe a year away, and by away I mean off the field on game day. A year of sitting behind a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo, like Derek Carr, and learning from them how to be a pro. Garoppolo might be the ideal guy because of that offense and all that, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But I'm not going to knock the Jets for acknowledging their mistake and trying to correct it. Like that, one of the problems you see with NFL front offices and coaching staffs is these egos where they get something wrong and they're afraid to admit it. And they might bail on a guy too early, or they might not put a guy in a position to succeed and just stay that, have a guy play a spot where he's not as good as he could be elsewhere, and sometimes just stick with that guy for a couple of years and then he goes elsewhere and flourishes. So this is the Jets with a very big microscope on, like under the microscope. Here you have the New York Jets publicly acknowledging that of the two key ways you can develop a quarterback, we tried one and failed. So rather than point the finger at him and let him languish on the bench and cutting him, we're going to stick with this kid and we're going to see if the other way works. And then if it doesn't, you can look in the mirror and say, we did what we could for this kid and it didn't work out. Now listen, if you want to get angry and say, well, that should have been the first thing they did. Okay, fine. Maybe they should have benched him. Maybe what is step 2 now should have been step 1 before. But that's water under the bridge. The Jets' 2 options right now are give up on the kid or keep working with a different approach. They've chosen to keep working with a different approach. And it might piss people off right now because he was just a second-round pick. But I'll tell you what, in a year or two, if this kid starts to flourish and becomes the guy they hope he can be, then no one's going to be complaining and everyone is going to pretend they were on board. Everyone's going to say, I knew this was a great idea. Despite the fact right now I'm seeing a lot of people, it's stupid, cut him, it's posturing, they're going to trade him. Maybe they will. Maybe another coach with a huge ego who loved Zach calls the Jets and says, we'll give you a 3 for him. And maybe the Jets say, okay, rather than work with him for the next couple of years, we'll give you a 3, and then we'll pay a boatload of money for another quarterback. It's possible. But I'm just saying right now that based on what the Jets are saying, and based largely, if you remember a couple of weeks ago, that Robert Saleh presser, where I pointed out the fact that, we get the pressers, we get the canned answers, we know what's going to be asked, we know what's going to be answered. I said a couple weeks ago, Robert Saleh appeared to have a very genuine moment when he expressed some frustration and said, everybody wants to develop players, but nobody has the patience to let us do it. And I'm paraphrasing there. But I'm assuming he's talking about fans, he's talking about coaches, he's talking about the pundits, the media, is that, oh, this team never develops players. And then when you take the time to develop players, oh, this guy must be a bust because they're not playing him. So that was the first indication to me that I think the Jets might mean it. I think they really might stick with this kid and work with him. And now that looks to be the case. How it goes, we have no idea. And I still have concerns. Like I said, love the approach. But I still do worry about Zach Wilson. I've talked about this in the past. Fight or flight. He looks to be a guy who's scared to hang tough in the pocket when things are closing in. And I don't know that you can coach that out of a guy. Maybe you can. But fight or flight, that natural response, that's your nature. Can you coach that out of him? We'll find out in time. But what we know right now is the Jets are sticking with the kid. And I can't knock that. And, but Glenn, people say, oh, you're going to waste a roster spot on him? Every single year, every team uses 1 or 2 roster spots on guys who play very little, if at all. Because they feel like, oh, he's a developmental guy. We like him. We don't want a team to poach him off our 53. Tony Adams, perfect example. Jeremy Ruckert and Tony Adams both took roster spots all year this year. Nobody's upset about it. Of course, Zach will be a higher profile guy, of course. But this doesn't mean you can't do it. If the media is going to hound you on it and ask Robert Saleh every day about how Zach Wilson's doing, just shut him down. Zach's QB3. Zach's QB4 right now. We're not talking about him. So you can't let, concerns over, sort of like the Tebow circus, the media constantly hounding you about a backup. You can't let that stop you from working to develop a guy you believe can be elite. And he can. He's just got to do the things he did well. He's got to do them consistently. and he's got to start hanging in the pocket. So that's a while down the road. We won't know the outcome of this for some time, but I will just say I love that the Jets are saying we failed with one approach to developing a quarterback and playing him right away. We are going to take a step back. We are going to try the other approach, which is to let him sit, watch, learn, and go from there, rather than just throw the baby out with the bathwater and a few years down the road look back and go, damn it, that kid is great somewhere else. We should have hung with him. There's no downside to keeping him. There's only upside. So kudos to the Jets for putting their egos aside and admitting they were wrong in how they approached it and their willingness to change gears and hope to get it right the second time around. QB2. Who's that going to be next year? I would imagine Mike White comes back to be QB2, knows the system, and you can talk about, Mike White didn't win this, he didn't win that. Look around the league, folks. You're not going to find a lot of QB1s to be your QB2. Like, if you can get a guy like Mike White who can move the football, and he can move it between the 20s. Now, is the red zone stuff, is that, I hate to say play calling because it's still up to Mike White and the offense to execute. But I feel like at QB2, you could do a lot worse than Mike White. I feel like you want a guy who's got game experience and knows the offense well and who has performed well in game situations. Mike White fits all three of those. As we said, if he had come out and, blown the doors off last week and this week, the Jets might have some competitors coming in to offer him big money. That's not going to happen now. He may not even play this week. This week might be Joe Flacco to close out the season. What are you going to do? Mike White downgraded yesterday. Zach Wilson, of course, not playing. Mike White downgraded, so you're down to Flacco and Strevler with week 17 approaching, week 18. Jets fans can't win with this week, right? No matter what the Jets do, you're helping the Pats or you're helping the Dolphins. I honestly don't care. I'm going to watch the game. I'm going to hope to see some good plays. I'm looking for Tony Adams. I mentioned him earlier. He's going to get some playing time. I said when they picked him up as a UDFA that I'd seen him. I'd watched a couple of Illinois games and thought he was a fairly good player. Now we're seeing him come along and maybe get a start. So that'll be interesting. But Mike White, probably QB2, didn't get it done the other day, but I don't care what anybody says. I watched that game and I felt like I was watching Zach Wilson again. You can say you didn't think, you can't blame the ribs. You can't, or you can. Like, I see people saying, if you're out there playing, you got to play, no excuses. Right, he went out there, he played, and the fact that with broken ribs or, freshly healing broken ribs, which were undoubtedly still sore, he looked about as good as Zach Wilson has looked in recent weeks. Couldn't complete passes to open receivers, couldn't move the ball. Well, he did move the ball, again, didn't move it in the red zone. Previous week, Jets would have been shut out against Jacksonville. The only reason the Jets weren't shut out against Jacksonville was because Quinnen Williams forced a fumble deep in Jacksonville territory, which the Jets then kicked the field goal. If not for that, then the Jets get shut out last week. They put up 6 points against Seattle. Terrible effort. Again, receivers were open all over the place, and Mike White was just he was bad. And are we going to say it was just a coincidence that the week his ribs were broken, we saw his worst football yet. He was out there, he played, did what he could, wasn't good enough, and I think he comes back next year as QB2. But I think that, again, I think that you could do worse. So I know a lot of Zach Wilson fans can't stand Mike White. They don't like that Mike White had the nerve to be better than Zach Wilson this year. They may just have to suck it up and accept the fact that he's good enough to be your QB2, while Zach will be probably QB3 or 4, while you try to develop somebody. While you try to develop Zach and work with a starter. And go, again, with whether it's Carr. And listen, there's some names out there. We might go over the whole list of names. I know we went over some the other day. But, what do you do if you're the Jets? And this is the big question, and a few people have asked this on Twitter. Say you want Carr, say you want Garoppolo, the top 3 or 4 guys, whoever they are in your mind, if they all go elsewhere, are you gonna use another one on a quarterback? I don't see that happening. It's gonna have to be another vet. What if Baker Mayfield goes out there this Sunday? What did he do the other day? Something like 24 for 28? And what if he goes out there this Sunday and has another monster day? So he goes, 25 for 31 with a few touchdowns. Like, you're going to look at this guy and go, he's brand new to that team. And within a couple weeks was playing, has a couple of games where he's completing 80% of his passes. And this is a former first-round pick whose team won 11 games a couple years ago with him playing well, right? This wasn't a Zach situation. This was Baker Mayfield playing. You could say Baker Mayfield won 11 games, knowing his team won 11, but he was a big part of it. He wasn't the thing preventing the wins. Or he wasn't making it more difficult for the team to win, as Zach was with the Jets. So Baker Mayfield, I mean, the name's out there. Jameis Winston, do you make a move for him? He's been a backup in New Orleans all year. They're probably, I actually heard someone the other day predict that's where Carr would land. So, you would imagine Jameis Winston's not penciled in to start anywhere next year. Neither is Baker Mayfield. I'm just talking if the Jets miss out on the guys that everyone wants. Whether it's Carr or Garoppolo, whoever's at the top of your list. If the Jets miss out on that player, what's plan B? What's plan C? It may get that far down the line before the Jets get their guy. And quarterback in round 1, I don't see it. If you're going to draft one, a guy we've talked about, we'll talk about more in the future, Jake Haener out of Fresno State, probably my favorite mid-round quarterback. Guy does a lot of things really well. But we'll see. We'll see what happens there. And speaking of guys who do things really well, Sauce Gardner's got to win Defensive Rookie of the Year. It's got to happen. Go back and watch that game in Seattle. They challenged him a lot. I really believe that was Seattle knowing they were going to win the game and saying, let's beat this guy over the top a couple times to get our boy Tariq Woolen bumped up those ballots. Let's move Tariq Woolen up a few spots by beating Sauce a few times. And they couldn't do it. So, and the Sauce hate is hilarious. Like every time Sauce gets a pass defensed, all of a sudden anything is pass interference. You get these lunatics. Sauce Gardner, breaks out of his stance and it's pass interference. The guy's he's been unreal. It's unbelievable to think that you might have a rookie cornerback who is the best in the NFL. Or who, even if he's not, the fact he's in the conversation, the fact that people, and not just Jets fans, like Jets fans and, the former players, the analysts, are saying Sauce Gardner might be the best corner in the NFL. Okay, even if he's the 6th best corner in the NFL, for a rookie, that is phenomenal. Sauce Gardner 100% deserves to be Defensive Rookie of the Year. And that's no disrespect to Tariq Woolen. I loved him coming out of college. Watched a few of his games. Thought he was unbelievably smooth for a guy his size. The speed, obviously, off the charts. The length and the inexperience. Woolen was a converted wide receiver. Like, he was new to the position. And already, he looked like a natural out there. So Tariq Woolen, no disrespect to him, but Sauce Gardner has been the better player. Whether fans like it or not, well, I should say whether Seahawks fans like it or not, Sauce just doesn't give up any yards. Woolen's had more picks, which is great. Again, I'm not knocking the guy. I'm not saying he's not going to be a future All-Pro. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve to be in the conversation. He 100% deserves to be in the conversation. But when the job of a corner is stop quarterbacks from completing passes. And that's an area where Sauce has been better. Sauce has been, you can't say, and there have been some really good rookies this year at the corner position. Just that Sauce has been the best. So it's tough for corners to win Defensive Rookie of the Year. Normally it goes to the guy with the most sacks or the guy with the most picks. But I think Sauce has been so special that he's garnered enough conversation that he's got a shot to win it. Garrett Wilson, does he win it on the other side on offense? I think there's a couple guys he's going to have to overcome. Less likely. I think with better quarterback play, he would have run away with it. It wouldn't even be close. They would have already given it to him if he had better quarterback play, but that hasn't been the case. Garrett Wilson has had to deal with some really bad passes this year trying to pull in. So that was really, that was tough to watch. That was really tough to watch. And you know what else was tough to watch? Was the Jets' offensive line on Sunday against Seattle, which gets me thinking about, again, moving forward. What's the plan with the O-line next year? You still have one game left. It's a game that you're playing for nothing. Who knows who they're going to roll out there. But I'm seeing a lot of our O-line is terrible. Our O-line's in shambles. I talked about it the other day. The numbers for the Jets O-line and pass protection with anyone other than Zach Wilson last year, and Zach Rosenblatt out of the New York Daily News tweeted this out, was actually really good in terms of pass pro, in terms of pressures allowed, in terms of sacks allowed. They were top 10 in both categories with anyone but Zach Wilson at quarterback, which lends credence to those of us who say Zach's holding onto the ball too long, Zach's running out of the pocket and creating bad situations for himself that it's a sack on paper, but really it's Zach Wilson's decision-making that caused the sack, not the play of the O-line. So the O-line has not been perfect, but they have been far from terrible. They've had a quarterback who's made them look worse than they are. And then, you can go, but what about the run blocking? Well, the run blocking isn't great because when the quarterback is playing that way, I mean, I'm literally watching games with 9, 10 guys in the box. Like, 5 guys try to block 9. Let's see how that goes. So there wasn't much room to run. There wasn't, even just by having Mike White in there last week, we saw a little more running room for the offense. Not that Mike LaFleur exploited that or anything, but we saw them move the ball on the ground, abandon the run too early for my liking. We do see that a lot from Mike LaFleur. So the O-line, listen, next year, no one knows to expect from Mekhi Becton, but he's another one. He's another one I see fans saying, dump him, get rid of him. Explain to me the downside. Tell me what the downside is to having Mekhi Becton on your roster. Go back, people forget. Look what this guy did as a rookie. He was manhandling guys. You can't find me highlights of another NFL player, let alone rookie player, tossing defenders like they're no longer in the all-22. You need it to be the all-29 if you want to see where the guy went. Mekhi Becton is throwing guys off the field as a rookie. And we said coming out of Louisville that we were a little unsure. Like, what do you expect from this kid year one? The Louisville pass sets, the ball comes out so quickly. Is this guy going to be polished enough? There are going to be some struggles. But Mekhi Becton as a rookie at times looked like he came from another planet. And yes, he got hurt because someone got thrown onto the back of his leg. And then the injury he had this year, I don't know how many people realize this, the injury Mekhi Becton had this year was as a result of the injury he had the previous year. So as I said the other day, it's unfortunate, but really you have one play that cost Mekhi Becton 2 years. Dr. David Cho on Twitter, if you follow him, he gives out a lot of his opinions on some of these plays, these injuries, these diagnoses. He's probably right 90% of the time. And his team said, before the year started, before Mekhi Becton got hurt, we were told that this injury, the very injury he suffered, that there was a likelihood it could happen because it's common with people coming off of the injury Mekhi Becton had. So Mekhi Becton was injured 2 years ago and then suffered a re-injury that was due to the surgery he had to have for the initial injury. So really, you're talking about a guy who lost 2 years for one play. Now, should that give you pause moving forward? Absolutely. Given the injury he had, there will be concerns with Mekhi Becton moving forward. But that's not that's anybody. Any player with an injury that serious. And people say, oh, well, because Mekhi Becton's big. So if Mekhi Becton weighed 340, 330, that wouldn't be a concern for a knee, coming off a knee injury? That's a concern for anybody, any NFL lineman coming off of a dislocated kneecap that then gets re-injured post-surgery. That's going to be a concern for anyone. But anybody who's saying that you get rid of Mekhi Becton now because of the injuries of the past and not move forward and see if he's recovered, see what he can do, I don't understand that. There is zero risk. There is zero downside to having him on the roster. All that can happen from having Mekhi Becton on the roster is you've got a guy who's capable of being an all-pro tackle and a guy who might be at a point where the injuries prevent him from moving forward. And then you move on as a team. Fine. But what does cutting him now do? The season's about to end. You're about to enter a point where you've got a 90-man roster and you want 89 guys minus Becton and bring somebody else in. I can't get my head around that. I really can't. Here's a young guy, serious injury, all-world potential, but let's cut him before we find out if he's healthy again because he got hurt 2 years ago from a guy getting thrown onto his leg and then re-injured that same, re-aggravated that same injury. It's terribly unfortunate circumstance, but to take that out on Mekhi Becton and say he should be cut is just absurd. And I don't know, listen, if you're not paying attention, look at some of the videos the Jets put out on their website. They do the little players answer questions as they come out to practice. A couple weeks ago, Mekhi Becton made an appearance. That dude was looking trimmed down. Might be as small as we've seen him since getting drafted. So even with the injury, we know the diet's right. We know he's putting the work in. He's dropped a ton of weight. And I still see fans say, move on from this kid. Move on. Get him. Dump him. He's no good. That's craziness. So, long-winded apology there for, I apologize for just sticking with Mekhi Becton there because I want to discuss the O-line as a whole. So, okay, fine. You want to say left tackle Mekhi Becton's a question mark? I'll give you that because he is. It's about his health. So that's where, to me, you use the round 1 pick at tackle. Then at left guard, unfortunately, if Laken Tomlinson doesn't pick things up, that's going to be an issue. He did not play up to his potential this year. He did not play up to his salary. Cutting him would result, I believe, in like $14 million in dead money. The Jets aren't going to do that in year 2. You're going to give him a chance to bounce back. Then at center, worst case scenario, you bring McGovern back, who's been solid. Not great, but he's good. If not, whether it's free agency, whether it's the draft, there's a couple of names who are interesting come draft time. But I think at the worst case, you get McGovern back. At right guard, again, Herbig was playing really well until he had his calf injury. Does he come back? Does AVT go back to right tackle? Or does he play right guard? I would have no issue with having Becton on the roster as a tackle, your round 1 pick on the roster as your left tackle, and then if Becton is healthy, he plays right tackle, and AVT plays right guard. If Becton has another injury setback, then you plug AVT in at right tackle. And again, you've got the Jets, by the time they free up by the time they free up cap space with cuts this offseason, they're going to have money to add some free agents. And you better believe they're going to bring in some guys who can play the O-line. But again, Herbig, absolutely fine at right guard. He's been a starter for the Eagles. He started for the Jets this year. Let him get his calf healthy, whatever injury he has going on. And then you've got a good right guard in Herbig, who looked damn good at times, especially in the run game. AVT at right tackle, or you've got AVT or Becton at tackle. You've got AVT or Herbig at right guard, McGovern at center, which is fine, Tomlinson a question mark at left tackle, and then either Becton or a first-round pick at left tackle. Like, this isn't the Jets of a few years ago, where it's, Brian Winters, playing stuck together with duct tape, and Kelvin Beachum, who's like, a mid-level tackle who might have some good days and will have some bad days. Like, these are high-level guys, or at the very least, slightly above average guys, which in today's NFL is plenty. How many all-pro, all-world offensive lines are out there? How many O-lines out there have 4 or 5 guys who just dominate every week, or 3 guys who dominate every week? There's not a lot of them. A lot of really good teams that win a lot of games have some average to above average starters on their offensive line, and if you have the quarterbacks and you have the weapons, you can do that. That's why Derek Carr, Jimmy Garoppolo, an experienced veteran who can take advantage of the weapons that they will have at their disposal, because obviously whoever is playing quarterback for the Jets next year will have weapons at their disposal. You imagine, Jeremy Ruckert, you would expect him to make some strides next year. Elijah Moore, who started to surface a little bit later in the season once Mike White started targeting him. I still think wholeheartedly Elijah Moore can play. We know Garrett Wilson can play. Expect at least one receiver to be brought in via the draft. And again, Ruckert, expect him to get elevated next year. Conklin was inconsistent. His biggest issue was ball security this year. But once you add Breece Hall to that, and Michael Carter, what a huge question mark that is. What the hell happened there? I mean, I don't know what to think moving forward with him. They completely bailed on that guy. He did look like a different player, and that was ugly. But either way, expect, with Bam Knight, with, is Ty Johnson a part of the future? The Jets clearly like him. I thought the game he had the other day was the best he's had in quite some time. I've always been a believer that if you give that guy 10 plus carries a game, he'll make some plays. You just never see it happen often enough. That you get the rare game where Ty Johnson gets 9, 10, 11 carries, and he'll make a couple plays. But too often, no carries for a month, and then he gets 2 carries, and it's back to the bench for another month. So I doubt he's part of the future. No issue if he is, but expect more weapons to come via the draft, via free agency, and for whoever the quarterback is, be it Carr, be it Jimmy G, they're going to have some stuff to work with. Didn't go live last night. As I said, had some audio setbacks, so we'll be back next week. Myself, Dylan Terman, and we will have Chris Schubert of the Draft Network coming on to talk Jets and to talk draft. That'll wrap it up for us this week, and have a good one, Jets fans. One more week to go, and then we head into the offseason.